Dartmouth College ก็ได้หรือว่าพี่จะเล่าว่าลอรี่เป็นคนเลี้ยงผึ้งซึ่งรู้เรื่องผึ้งทุกอย่าง Amazing มากรวมถึงเป็นเพื่อนพี่นะคะเพราะเราไปเป็นเฟลโลที่ Sustainability Institute ด้วยกันแล้วก็เป็นคนที่แม่งโคตรบ้าน้องข้างงานของเราไม่ใช่งานง่ายนะคะเพราะน้องมีแบ็คกราวด์เป็นแอนิเมเตอร์น้องทำงานกับฝ้าที่เป็นคอมพิวเตอร์ไซเอนซ์แล้วเอา
No worries.
I'm worried about what you're saying. Should I be?
Yeah, sure. Why?
I don't know.
ลอรี่บ้านที่เขาอยู่ค่ะอยู่บนเอโควิลเลจนะคะเดี๋ยวเขาเพิ่งเล่าให้ฟังว่าชีวิตบนฟาร์มชีวิตที่บนฟาร์มเป็นยังไงบ้างแล้วงานที่ทำที่เรียกว่าดีไซน์แบบที่ผสมเอาอาร์ตนะคะแอนิเมชันบวกคอมพิวเตอร์ไซเอนซ์ที่เป็นไซน์เราไปแก้ปัญหาสังคมด้วยโมเดลที่ผ่านการทำงานกับนักศึกษากับมหาวิทยาลัยนะคะโจทย์แต่ละอันน่าสนใจแค่ไหนเดี๋ยวเปลี่ยนไปก็ได้นะเปิดจะน้องอะไรอย่างนี้นะคะก็เขามาเมืองไทยเพื่อมาทำเวิร์กช็อปให้อาจารย์มหาวิทยาลัยค่ะเรื่องนี้เลย framing the questions นะคะพี่จะเล่าเรื่องสุดท้ายแล้วก็จะได้ไปวิชากันสักทีเหตุผลที่เราเลือกเรื่องนี้มาคุยกันเนี่ยเพราะว่ามีชีวิตน้องข้างไหนไหมคะที่ตั้งคำถามผิดแล้วแม่งโคตรเสียเวลาชีวิตทำไปแล้วแต่แม่งแบบไม่ตรงอะค่ะอย่างเช่นรัฐบาลเรานะคะอยากให้เด็กพิการทุกคนได้เรียนอยากทำทุกวิธีการให้โรงเรียนนะคะสามารถมี facility ทางโล่งทางลาดวิวแชร์ไปเรียนได้ลงทุนมหาศาลทั่วประเทศแต่เด็กพิการไม่ไปเรียนค่ะแล้วมีคนไปทำรีเสิร์ชตามทีหลังทำไมทำตั้งเยอะครูก็พร้อม facility ก็พร้อมแต่เด็กก็ยังไม่ไปโรงเรียนปรากฏว่าสิ่งหนึ่งที่คนทำลืมมองก็คือว่าเด็กอายที่ตัวเองพิการก็เลยไม่ไปเรียนแล้วก็ไม่มีใครทำอะไรตรงนั้นนะคะสุดท้ายลงทุนไปกี่ล้านก็ไม่มีประโยชน์เด็กก็ยังไม่ไปเรียนอยู่ดีเกิดขึ้นตลอดเวลานะคะหรือว่าตัวอย่างที่แบบเป็น World Organization อย่าง Gates Foundation เนี่ยค่ะวันนี้ก่อนหน้านี้เกตลงเงินเยอะมากที่จะแก้ปัญหามาเลยในแอฟริกาก็แบบทุ่มเงินที่จะแบบให้คนไปฉีดวัคซีนได้มีคนได้วัคซีนตลอดทุกคนนะคะแต่ในการให้วัคซีนนั้นนะคะมันต้องให้ทั้งอาหารเพราะว่าวัคซีนจะเวิร์กถ้ามันย่อยได้ดีกว่าถ้ามีอาหารในท้องแต่ปรากฏว่าคนทำงานเนี่ยค่ะเช่นเดียวกันทุ่มเงินเป็นพันล้านเลยค่ะแล้วก็โฟกัสแค่จะทำงานให้คนได้รับวัคซีนแต่คนจนนะคะไม่มีตังค์กินข้าวรับวัคซีนไปแล้วไม่ได้กินข้าวค่ะวัคซีนไม่มีประโยชน์เลยเสียไปอีกพันล้านฉะนั้นเนี่ยคนทำงานที่สร้างความเปลี่ยนแปลงนะคะหรือแม้กระทั่งคนที่สนใจที่เปลี่ยนแปลงชีวิตตัวเองอ่ะการตั้งจุดให้ถูกว่าคุณจะแก้อะไรอ่ะโคตรสำคัญถ้าใครรู้จักบริษัทไทโอที่เป็นบริษัทที่กำลังทำดีไซน์ thinking กำลังการสร้างนะคะก็เป็นบริษัท product design ที่ดีมากๆบริษัทในโลกเนี่ยไทโอใช้เวลา 20% นะคะของ process ในการเฟรมคำถามให้ถูกต้องแล้วก็ 80% ลงไปทำนะคะดังนั้นวันนี้พี่ดีใจมากที่เราได้ลองจัดดูเราทำเรื่องนี้นะคะในการมีแบบฝึกหัดลองคุยกันลองใช้เครื่องมือบางอย่างนะคะในการหาคำถามเพื่อตั้งต้นทำงานหรือว่าแก้ปัญหาอันนี้คำถาม
You're done. Now time.
ขอเสียงตบมือให้เราเรียนได้ไหมคะ
It's okay. Oh, so nice to be here. Thank you so much, Sawadika, for inviting me. Sydney,
and she just have Thai massage so she can fall asleep
Yes,
anytime.
I was going to say I just had the best massage ever. So I'm very relaxed, and it's great to see a group of young people. You make me feel at home because I teach people about your age. How many people were here last summer when I gave the talk last summer? Anybody? Okay, so a few. So I apologize to those of you who were here. You'll see some of the same thing over again. But some new things too. So we'll do some new things. As I'm talking, if my Thai isn't very good, so if I say something that you don't understand, please just call out, let me know. I'm happy to try and say it again or get some translation or some help. If you have questions or ideas, it's very informal. We'll be really informal, and I just want you to, be part of it and talk to me in the middle. Don't hesitate to stop me, okay? Great. So, as Nui said, we're going to talk today about an important topic. It's something that very few people get right. It's easier to get it wrong than it is to get it right. So we'll just talk about it for a little bit and then sort of introduce the idea. But, and also as Nui said, I'm a professor and I live on a farm. So I think she said those two things, yeah? So this is the farm where I live. It's in Vermont. Vermont is in the northeast, near Boston and Montreal, Canada, not sort of halfway between each of those two cities. And the college where I teach is Dartmouth College, and Dartmouth is an Ivy League college like Harvard and Yale and Princeton. It's the smallest Ivy League college, and it's also in the northeast, near Boston, closer to Boston. And so this is it may be hard to see over there, so you might want to move over, like over there more. Feel free to move your desks or sit, maybe we have more chairs. You can move them over. Great. I want you to be able to see. So I live on this, as Nui said, I think I heard her say something about co-housing. There's 22 families that live on 270 acres. How many of them? Okay, a lot of land. And big. And we use the farmers, there's a farm, and the farmers use these Norwegian fjord horses. Even though we have plows, they choose to use these horses because it's better for the land, because the horses are natural fertilizer and they don't trample the land as much, and we don't use as then gasoline. So there's several reasons that we use this, and it's just kind of beautiful too. It's also visually stunning. So all of these things, are part of the decision making, and just like at Cobb Hill, we ask ourselves questions all the time about what's the right thing to do, how do we do it, what's the trade-offs, and so, framing the question is always important for us too. And I'm a beekeeper, and I always ask myself, why do I do this? Because I get stung, and I was allergic to bee stings for a while, but now I'm not. But I can talk to you, I could spend the whole 2 hours talking about bees, but I won't. So that's me. And the work that I do, I have a new lab. The last time I was here in the summer, we were just sort of starting the lab. Now there are about 64 students in the lab who work in the lab, and we have about 26 projects that we're working on. So the DALI lab stands for Digital Arts Leadership and Innovation. It's a research and development lab in the computer science department. So I come from an arts background, but I teach in the computer science department. So I have both art and computer science. And I bring those things together. So the mustache, because it's Salvador. It's from Salvador Dali. Nui and I went to visit Dali's house, and I was sobbing because it was so incredible. It touched me so deeply, and so then I needed an excuse to use Salvador Dali. Went back, got funding, and called the lab the Dali Lab. So you never know what's going to happen. So what we do in the DALI lab is we bring together computer science developers and designers together on small teams, undergraduates and graduates, and they work on projects with not-for-profits, with faculty, with centers, with startup businesses, and our specialty is communicating complicated ideas in simple, meaningful ways. So somebody will come to us, they'll need something explained or visualized, and that's what we do, data visualization work. So Salvador Dali, I don't know, can you see when I stand up here?
No problem.
Okay,
Don't worry.
so some of our work, this is a project that we're doing with Kofi Adami in the Thayer Engineering School and with the hospital. So he made an electronic device that goes on the chest, gets taped onto the chest, and it can read, it gets signals about, whether you're coughing or wheezing. So people who have asthma or have other lung diseases, this tracks it, we sort of clean up all that data and we send the data to the cell phone, and we built the interface, the signal that goes, and the reading of the data, and then the interface, we're just now doing the interface for the iPhone. So you'll be able to go around and because the iPhone has accelerometers and other sorts of GIS data, could say to you, oh, well, I see you're exercising a lot today, Lorie, and the last time you exercised this much, you really started coughing, so you might want to take your inhaler. Or it might say, the weather in Bangkok, there's a lot of pollen. It's, you might want to bring your medication with you. So it knows where I am, it knows what I'm doing, and it can give me personalized information and also give my doctor information. So that's one of our projects, one of our many. This, it's hard to see. This is a project we just started in the summer, last time I was here. This is with the U.S. Holocaust Museum and the Center for Prevention of Genocide, and they do these complicated models around risk of atrocities. Atrocities are 1,000 civilian deaths in a short period of time by an organized group. And we visualize that data, and then we track news sources and other things to try to help give human rights organizations and governments and people who are making policy information so they know how to go in and hopefully avoid the next atrocity, things like Syria. And this is a project we're working on with the Native American students. It's called Discover You. And this is in the United States, the Native American students, Native American Indians, often live in tribal villages that have very poor education and when they're in high school, 80% of the students want to go on to college, but there's no help along the way. Has anybody here applied to an American school before? Let me tell you that it's painful, it's awful, it's hard. There's the paperwork, the forms, the tests. It's really crazy. It isn't like you just go and go to college. Super hard. So this is trying to give people sort of a Pinterest-style website with mentorship and other things that they can go to a school that has a Native American program especially, but any school, and they can say, they don't even know what a major is, so they can go on and say, oh, well, did you know that if you major in engineering, you might end up doing this, and here's some Native Americans who did that. And here's what you need to study in high school, and here's some places you can go, and you can put things in, it'll remind you to take the test or to do what you need to do. So that's that site. This is some wearables that we're doing. So we work with doctors on some wearable devices for the wrist and things, but the fun stuff is wearable clothing. So we have high-end fashion meets cyber. It's sort of Project Runway meets, geek. And so this particular one is a women's motorcycle jacket, and the fringe here is the turn signal. So if you're going to turn, it lights up, and this red stripe is the brake light, and then embedded in the sleeve is a whole mapping system. So that's just one of the projects that will be in April. We're having a big runway show. So we have a wedding dress that responds to movement, and then when the bride kisses the groom, so the flowers open as you when the bride kisses the groom, they blink and sparkle like that. A dress that responds to eye gaze, things like that. So here are people in the lab working and playing and meeting. We have a small space, but we have nice t-shirts and happy people. Here's some, people just sort of meeting. We meet once a week. People work late, so the lab is busiest at 3 in the morning. So people in the morning, there's no one there. They come in around noon, and they're there until 3 in the morning. So there's always people in the lab late at night, which is good for me while I'm here because I can talk to them finally. It's 3 a.m. for them, 3 p.m. for me. It's perfect. So here we are. It's sort of like a startup setting. I have to feed them a lot of food, and they play music. There's lots of instruments, and always people working really hard. So that's the lab. Any questions so far? Okay. So now we're getting into the workshop part. So this is, we just did anybody, just you guys went to the workshop that we just did, is that right?
Yeah.
So Charles Kettering was the CEO, and he was an engineer at Ford Motor Company, and he made this statement: a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And I'll say that again. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. And I like this quote very much because it's true. The hardest part is figuring out what is it that we're trying to solve. So you guys are all, I think, how many of you are interested in doing social entrepreneurship at some point? Yeah, good. Oh, that's awesome. So you all have ideas for ways that you want to use your work to help society, but the hardest part is figuring out what to do and how to do it, right? And so sometimes asking the question in the right way makes it easier if you do the work up front. So we'll be playing around with that today. So this is a project that we did. I'm in the computer science department, and there's computer scientists are often geeks. And sometimes now they're more and more they're looking like this. And they put us in this building at Dartmouth, which is a former mental hospital. Because that's where, right? You said I was crazy, right?
I know.
Yeah. So they put us in this really ugly building. It's a former mental hospital. And they have this building directory with the names of all the people, the faculty, and their room number where they are. And about 6 or 7, this is an old project, and I've talked about this, some of you have seen this before. About 6 or 7 years ago, someone gave some money and said, we need to put cool things in this ugly, awful building. And so to make it not quite so ugly and awful. And so I said, well, let's make something that is useful. So let's make a new interactive video directory. So what we did was, what I was thinking was that when people come into a building, who goes into a building like the computer science department? Who would come into the building? Who are the users who might enter the building? Anyone? Students. Who else? Professors. And one more. Maybe, or two. Who else would go in? Who? People who are lost, yeah, more and more, a lot of them. People coming for a meeting with the faculty, staff come in. And so it seemed like when you're coming into the building, you're either coming in for a class or you're coming in to meet with someone. And since it's such an ugly building, people are not coming to see the beautiful architecture. So they are definitely coming to meet people. So it seemed like a building directory should be about who is in the building, what they're interested in, and where to find them. So I asked this question: can we highlight the people in the building, show who they are and what they do, and give directions to their office, and make it fun? So that was sort of my challenge. Can we do all those things? And so it was unclear, but I thought I would give it a try. So I got kind of creative and had this kind of playful idea. And then I worked with some students, and we developed some simple software to do this. And I can't show it to you because there's no internet, but this is what there is. So now you go, and there's a big kiosk in the front, and these are videos, and people are moving around. This is a person with a Viking helmet. These are all faculty. And when you touch their picture, they start to wave. And the people around point to that person. So they point up, or they point left or right. And then if you click it again, a new page comes up, and it has all these weird and interesting facts. My first, the faculty member's first job, if they were a computer, they would be, if they weren't, interesting, fun things about them with more pictures. And then it has their room number, and you can click on the room number, and it has a map. You're here, and you're going here. So it's full of interesting interactions. And what happened was that first, these are computer science professors. And so I had no idea whether anybody would. I thought that people Mine, I'm like going like this because I was first and I thought the faculty would be like that. But they aren't. They're wearing weird costumes every single term. They email me and say, I've got an idea for a new video. And they just keep on wanting to be, you know, when people get hired, it's the first thing they do is come and be videotaped. The faculty became, you know, there were faculty I didn't even know who they were because people walk around like this all the time. And now everybody talks to each other. It created a whole sense of community. People who aren't just lost come and to play with the directory. When there's a class, you know it because they look at their professor and they get information about them. And they're exploring. So it created this interesting new thing, this community amongst the faculty, a community between, more of a connection between the faculty and the students and the other visitors. And it gave just a place that in this ugly building, it did exactly what I needed to do, which was take this ugly building and make it cooler and fun. So, so that was that. So, why is this important? I don't know why that slide was there. Then I started to, you know, I live on this farm and we care about climate change, and Nui and I were these sustainability leadership fellows together, and I really, you know, we do a lot of things around sustainability, and it seemed like we wanted, you know, how do you deal with climate change? And we're going to talk about this later, these big topics, right? How do you deal with these big, big topics? And, you know, it's hard to know where to even start. But I had this little idea. And the little idea was to work with students at Dartmouth in the dormitories. Do you have dorms in your... Yeah, so in the dormitories, the students who live in the dorms, they don't get any kind of a bill for their electricity. They don't get charged more if they use a ton or less if they use a little. It's the same for everybody. So even though their tuition really is linked to how much electricity and utilities, and Dartmouth spends, by the way, they spend $500,000 in the dorms alone for electricity, and $2 million for heat. It's a cold and hot water and air conditioning. And overall in the campus, they spend $4 million on electricity and $8 million on heat, hot water, and air conditioning in the summertime. So that's a lot of money. That's $12 million on energy resources that's being spent every year. And so it seemed like we should start getting people doing something. And it seemed like students were a good place to start. And so I asked this question: how do you motivate students living in a dormitory to change their behavior and conserve resources? Right? How do you do it if it's not about the money? Which at the time, this was also 6 years ago, at the time, everybody thought it was all about money. If there wasn't a financial gain, people wouldn't change their behavior. It was the only thing that would work. And so I asked another question: how do you get people to understand what the problem is and to care enough to change their behavior? So there's a book called Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. I recommend it very much. It's all about behavior change and how to get people to change their behavior. It's got great examples. It's a fabulous book. And they talk in there, I hadn't read it yet because it hadn't been written, but they talk in there about how you need to touch their heart and their mind. So Nui tells me you'll understand this, but do you guys have speed limits?
We do.
You do?
We do.
Okay. And do you have any of these things that tell you how fast you're going? Anybody seen one of these? Anybody seen one of these? Yeah, okay. So this is a thing that's all over the US where they tell you in real time how fast you're going. And you drive along, and if you slow down, your speed goes down, and if you speed up, your speed goes up, and you can see how you're doing compared to the speed limit. And it's kind of a brilliant feedback system. So in systems dynamics, where you understand how a whole system works, what makes a system work, what keeps a system going, how systems flows and, do these guys know anything about systems?
Half of them, I guess.
Yeah. Who knows about a little bit about systems dynamics?
ใครเข้า system thinking มาบ้างคะ
Okay.
มึงนั่นแหละเข้า They don't know that they know. They don't know that they know.
They don't know that they know. Okay. So, we have systems in our body, and there's systems all around us. There's the transportation, there's all these systems, and systems sort of help each other and keep each other going. And so one of the things that will change a system is to give feedback about how the system is behaving, how it's acting. So like if your digestive system, it gives you feedback if you ate too much, right? And so then you know to stop, to eat a little bit less, or to take care of yourself. But you need the feedback. If you didn't have any way of knowing that you'd eaten too much, you'd just keep eating and eating because it tastes good, which can also be fun. But after a while, the rest of your system tells you, gives you feedback. And so you have to get some feedback in order to know that what to do and that you're behaving in a way that might be harmful to the system or that might not be in your best interest. And so real-time feedback is the best because you can see it and test it. And so currently, at that time, the dorms had no feedback at all. They didn't even get a bill once a month, no less in real time. The other thing you need to change, so in order to change behavior, you need feedback to tell you how you're doing. You need information. So you need to know what the speed limit is. If all they said was your speed, and you didn't know how fast you're supposed to go, it wouldn't be very helpful, right? It would just tell you, okay, I'm going 28, woohoo, or 27 or whatever it is. But instead, it gives you information about what is your target speed. Climate change is really hard because everybody gives different sets of instructions about what to do about sustainability. Use compact fluorescents. No, don't use compact fluorescents, use LEDs. Recycle, no, don't, recycling is good, but really you need to do this. There's all these mixed messages, so it's a very, very hard one to get people to change their behavior. Then you need to have control. So if I'm the passenger in the car, I can scream and scream and scream and say slow down, but I can't actually slow the car down. So in the dorms, if I gave feedback about something that the students have no control over, they'll just get frustrated and stop paying attention. So we gave feedback about plug load and lighting, the sockets and the lighting in their dorm rooms and in their common spaces, not the elevator, electricity, or the air conditioning system, or even their heat, which they don't have a thermostat in their room. So it's like minus 20 degrees, let's see, what would that be Celsius? Minus
20 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Must be minus 30 or 40.
Minus 40 degrees. And it's so hot in your room that you have to open the window, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that wouldn't be very nice to do. So we wanted to give it over things that they have control over, and we wanted to create some sort of motivation. So with the speed limit, in the US they really do enforce the speed limit, and so you might get a ticket and have to pay a fine if you speed. But what's the consequence for using too much electricity at this college? Nothing. And so how the heck, if there's no consequence, were we going to get people to care about it and change their behavior? So at the time, the state of the art looked like this. This was a company called Tendril, and they just had gotten $100 million in VC money to give feedback to homeowners. This was for homeowners. And this is a company called Lucid Design, and they were out of Oberlin College in Ohio, and they were giving feedback to students. They had a system like this, and I thought about using it, but I looked at the graphs and the charts, and I thought that that was not very interesting. That if I didn't already care, I wouldn't care now. I thought we needed more, and so I had this idea to use an animated polar bear. And what happens is, here's the animated polar bear. They hooked up some digital meters that had never been hooked up anywhere at Dartmouth. We wrote a polar to get information from the digital meter and made a database. And then we looked at past behavior. So all the systems before this had simply given you, like this one, it just said, oh, now, on Tuesday you use this many kilowatts, and on Wednesday you use this many kilowatts, and on Thursday you use this. It didn't, I'd play around with those. I'd turn on my computer, I'd turn on the light, I'd see that it used more, but it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know whether I was using, I had to turn my computer on, right? And I had to turn the lights on, so I was so confused by those. So in our case, we watched behavior over time. We saw that Dartmouth students, like the students in my lab, use more electricity at 2 a.m. than they do at 9 a.m. And so we looked at that behavior over time and we said, how much electricity do we think you should be using at this day and time based on past behavior? And then if they were using less than we predicted, oops, oh, see, this is what keeps happening. Every time I go do this, it's the weirdest thing. I don't know why.
It's haunting.
And then it does this thing. Let's see if I can get it back. Okay. Come on. There we go. Ah! It just did it again. I don't know why. Something weird.
It doesn't allow you to play the videos? Or what?
It's not letting me play. Well, I have to find a different way to play the video. Let's see. All right. When it comes back, I'm just gonna. Okay, let's see. Okay, so. Do it? No. No, come on. Playing? There.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you use less than expected, then this animated bear in this kiosk in the hall was super happy. And when you use more, let's see if we can, All right, keep trying here. I've never had this happen before. I don't know what this is.
It's haunting.
It's haunted.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try this. And if you're using more than what you should, then the ice starts to crack and the bear falls through and the bear flails around. And there's all kinds of things in between. And we hoisted this on a group of students. We didn't ask them. And they started, electricity use went down 22% in the places where we had the system, which is a lot. And it stayed down. And they named the bear. And they told their friends to conserve resources. And it became viral. And we kept working on it. And let's see if I can show this video. Let's see what happens. So here's a little video that we made about
This
system.
video shows our information visualization system for real-time energy use feedback using animation. Greenlight Dartmouth visualizes complex
This is a
energy
3D
data in a dynamic, compelling, and meaningful interface. Our goal is to encourage people to change behavior in order to conserve resources. Total U.S. energy demand is projected to increase by more than 1/3 by 2025, with electricity demand rising by almost 40%. Current estimates are that as much as 60% of energy consumption is behavioral and can be reduced through behavioral changes and efficiency improvements. But in order to change behavior, people need information and motivation. We begin with an animation of a polar bear. When energy use is low, the bear is happy. But when energy use is high, the bear's well-being is endangered. Dartmouth, students have fallen in love with the bear. They named him, and they tell their friends to conserve electricity to prevent him from drowning. Our system was developed by students at Dartmouth as part of a digital arts and computer science project. We pull information from digital meters and store it in a database. Data collected includes plug load, lighting, heat, city water, hot water, energy creation from solar and other renewables, as well as printer usage data. We use historical data to predict expected energy use for a particular time and day. Our mood algorithm scores the current usage and calls up an appropriate animation. Any computer with a web browser can view our display in real time. In fact, the displays update every 5 seconds. A thermometer on the left side of the screen shows power usage in kilowatts, as well as a score and other statistics. For the numerically minded, we show graphs. Our graphs tell the story of how consumption has changed over time. We display recent use compared with historical data for the relevant time and day. The user can interact with hourly, daily, or weekly graphs. At Dartmouth, we use oil to heat the buildings. We want people to understand that energy usage has an impact on the environment. We show the impact of heat usage through animated oil wells. Our display shows current time of day and weather. When it's dark in Hanover, it's dark in the display. In fact, everything in our display emphasizes the relationship between the student and the environment. We provide information about the project, tips for reducing consumption, and information about how a dorm is doing. Competitions between dorms further encourage students to conserve resources. We've developed a Flash desktop widget for Mac and PC. Greenlight Dartmouth has already shown significant improvements in resource consumption. We are conducting additional user studies and working with sociologists to understand social norms around energy use. We've developed motion detection software to turn displays off when they are not in use. A 3D virtual Dartmouth imported into our game engine allows users to explore the campus and see energy data by building. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so we've improved it since then. It looks a lot nicer. The interface is a lot prettier. This is when it's sort of a grade of a C. The business school, Tuck Business School, the outgoing students bought the system for the college, and so we put in this penguin that wastes money or saves money, and it's got this sort of Bloomberg-like ticker tape, which they really love. It's saving money there. These are what the graphs look like now. You can compare any building to any other building, or month to month, or however you want to do comparisons. And then we have this item view where you can see how much money you saved or wasted that week, how many iTunes songs you could have bought if you. So anyhow, this is a social enterprise that I have. We still have the business. We've got the system in colleges across the United States, and in some businesses and data centers, and in some high schools as well, and elementary schools. And some of the schools had 55% over a year in the dorms. And we're talking to folks in Thailand. So people look at the kiosk, people started to think of themselves as people who cared about the bear, and so they cared about the environment. So they started doing things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, even though we aren't reading the amount of electricity used in the elevator. Or they started turning lights off in buildings we weren't monitoring, because they started to think about themselves beyond what we were measuring, which is one of the benefits of not having it be around money. One of the things that I had a hunch about, and since it's been proved by some behavioral economists in California, that if you just change the price, if you say, okay, I'm going to make electricity more expensive, then people change their behavior for a short period of time. In the US, when gas prices go up, people sell their big gas-guzzling cars and buy tiny little Priuses and small cars. But that's the only behavior they change. They just change their car. They might take the bus, but that's the only thing. Their driving behavior changes. The minute the prices go back down, they go back to their old behavior. But if you can get people to care in an emotional way, if you can get people to identify as people who are environmentalists or care about this topic, now people are much more likely to continue to care no matter what, even if the system isn't up, and to transfer that behavior onto other behaviors that they're doing as well. So they'll buy the Prius anyhow, even though we're not measuring that, or they'll do all kinds of other things. So there's sort of this added benefit that comes out of creating that emotional response. Okay, so we solved that question. Can we motivate students to change their behavior? Can we give them an emotional connection to the data? Can we get people to care? Yes was the answer. Who knew? So, some of you have seen this, what we're going to talk about now, and you guys get to do some work. Now it's your turn. In the design thinking process, and there's lots of different, this is user-centered design, there's also human-centered, there's lots of different words and charts and ways of showing this. But the idea with design thinking is you come up with an idea or a problem, and then you investigate it, and then you do a bunch of brainstorming, and then you narrow it down, and then you do a bunch of testing with prototypes, and then you narrow it down, and then you start over like that. So what we're going to do is that same basic process with framing. We're going to start with the problem, we're going to reframe it, then we're going to scale it, then we're going to reframe it, and then we're going to start talking about how we might solve those problems. So we're just going to go through that same process, but just for the first part of what you would be doing if you were starting to work on a project. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so see if you can recognize. Oh! Oh, darn!
I'm so sorry.
Okay. It'll come back. This is, I think, the last one that I actually have to interact with. Okay. So, see if you recognize this sound. Sound like that before?
Yes.
Yes? Anybody ever have a roommate who snored? Yes? Yes? Anybody here snore? Raise your hand if you have been told before that you snore by anybody at any time. Just raise your hand. Okay, if you're one of the snorers, stand up. Stand up if you're a snorer. It's okay, I'm standing with you. I'm sure that I thought of this in the middle of the night because I probably woke myself up snoring. I actually don't snore that much, but when I have a cold, I snore. The rest of you have never been told ever by anybody that you snore?
Liars.
Liars! Liars! Everybody snores every once in a while. Okay, so if these were your roommates, the question you might ask is, how do you get your roommate to stop snoring? Right? So the rest of you, how would you answer that? What's the solution to that question? You guys can sit down. Thank you. But talk to them. What's the possible solution for the snoring roommate? How do you get your roommate to stop snoring? Wake him up? Yeah, that works. What else?
Bring he or she to the hospital.
Take him to the hospital. Anything else?
You put the little sticky strips on.
Right, you put a strip on, right? So if we were trying to solve this problem with this question, those are the solutions we'd come up with. But there's other ways. We could reframe that question in other ways, right? We could ask ourselves, how do you stop being bothered by the person who's snoring? Right now, what's the solution?
An iPod.
Get an iPod and listen to music. What else? your spouse. What might you do to get out of there, or your roommate in a dorm? What else could you do?
Switch roommates.
Switch roommates. You have 2 snorers. Find someone else. Find someone else with a snoring roommate and switch. Put up a wall, maybe. Right? Soundproof.
Yes.
Right? So you could change something about the physical space. So now we've come up with 3 questions to the same simple problem. Your roommate snores. Right? So depending on what we asked, which question we asked, we came up with different solutions. Did you notice? The same thing is true in any kind of work that you do, whether it's work for school or work for your boss or work for social enterprises where you're trying to solve a problem. But everything in your life, if you ask one question, you'll get one set of answers. But as soon as you phrase the question differently, you'll get a whole other set of questions. And not only do you get a different set of questions, but you start thinking about it differently. Did you guys who are snorers, did you feel the relief when suddenly it was up to them to change their behavior instead of them changing yours? Yeah, it feels better, right? So there are all kinds of things, ways that you can reframe a question so that the solutions are completely different. So we're going to play around with that. I walked around Thailand and I said, what the heck? They're selling insects here to eat and people are buying them. You know, yuck, really. Why would anybody, eat insects? I couldn't imagine it. But then I started to think about it a little bit differently, and I started asking the question a little bit differently, and I started thinking, well, there must be some reason that people are buying crickets and insects to eat. So why? Why are people buying them? I started to ask myself and others, a lot of others. Why? Why? Do they taste good? What do you think? Yeah? Crunchy? Do you eat them fried, or how do you cook? How do you eat them?
Try weird things.
You like to try weird things.
Because he's weird.
Because he's weird. Yeah. So you like the taste? Why else might insects be something that people buy? Is that what you said?
Nutritional value.
Nutritional value. Absolutely. They have a lot of what? Protein. Protein. As it turns out, also, insects are hard to come by. They reproduce fast. So they're a renewable, inexpensive source of protein. So then I started thinking, looking into it a little bit more, and I started to see
Is it a real one?
it was on the internet, it must be real. I started to investigate a little bit about this whole phenomenon, and I saw that by 2050 there's going to be 8 billion people on the planet, and that in Europe alone we're going to need to have 70% more protein because of so many people that are going to be in Europe, not to mention the US or Asia or Africa. And or 50% more protein, and we're already using 70% of the agricultural land that we can possibly use for protein. So we're running out of space. Meat is expensive to raise. It's got a carbon footprint from all the methane and all the grains that cows and pork and chickens use. So it's an expensive and a dirty and a slow-growing source of protein. But insects are fast to grow, inexpensive, they don't take up any room, and they're a source of protein. So so what's the problem? If you wanted to state that whole thing as a problem, what might you say the problem is? What's the problem that we're trying to solve with insects?
Buy an alternative source for protein.
Right, we're going to need an alternative source for protein. So there's a problem is humans need protein and we need an alternative. We're getting to be too many of us on the planet, and so we need some alternative source of protein. So how might you state that in a question? How might we, if you started with, how might we, what might be the question?
How might we find a compensation for protein?
How might we what?
Find a compensation for protein.
Find a compensation for protein. Okay, good. What else? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by compensation now. What do you mean?
Maybe alternative.
An alternative. Perfect. How might we find an alternative for protein? Okay. What other question might you ask? Just if you switched it up. So we've taken this little tiny thing that I had a question of, which was, why would anyone eat insects? Now we've gotten into the bigger picture. So you can ask, how might we find an alternative to protein? What else might you ask?
How are we going to get people who never want to eat insects to eat insects?
How are we going to convince people to eat insects? What else might you ask?
How to prolong the unsustainable demand for food.
How can we prolong? How can we hold off? Is that what you mean? How can we make it last longer so it isn't a problem? Okay, that's right. How can we cram more chickens and pigs and cows into smaller space? That's a good question. If we're trying to solve this problem of the fact that there's too many people and not enough protein, one question to ask is, how do we get more of our traditional proteins? Another is, how do we convince people to eat insects? What else might we ask?
Reduce the population growth.
How do we deal with population growth? So that's excellent. Does anybody have any other questions?
Do we need that much protein?
Do we need that much protein? So look at how the solutions, when you hear these questions, can you sort of click in your mind and think about, so if we're trying to convince people to eat more insects, what might be a way to do that? What would some solutions be?
Encourage them to eat vegetarian food.
How do we get people to eat vegetarian food? So how would we do that? The problem is this, make the big one smaller, more manageable. So if it's climate change, it might be that people don't recycle, or it might be that people litter on the street, or it might be that people use too much gas in cars use too much fuel, right? So take something that's doable, fixable. And if it's too small and nobody cares, make it something bigger that people might care about. Find the bigger issue in it and state it as a problem first. Okay, so do that.
Someone asked, when they saw the questions, I have to find solutions.
No solutions. Just the problem. What you need to do is state your problem right now. Okay, so do you have a big problem and have you even the okay? So what's the problem? What's the bigger problem that you can talk about for that? But how do we make it something more universal? Something that relates to more people in Bangkok. What's a problem in Bangkok? How is it?
ปัญหาจากการที่พ่อแม่ทุกจานเรามีผลอะไรกันบ้าง
Excuse me. So a couple of things. Don't skip ahead. This is a very clear process. The process is this. I hear you guys like process, so I'm going to tell you the process. First, you define the question, the problem. If you go right to questions, you're skipping ahead. You're answering. You're trying to solve. You move towards questioning a problem that you haven't even defined yet. So define the problem first. be different depending on how you define the problem. Indifference, for example, it is absolutely impossible to solve indifference. I can tell you that right now. There is no way we can solve indifference. It's a state of mind, and it's completely vague. You can only solve indifference about X. Right? So if you've got indifference, state your problem. Indifference about lack of health care for the poor. Indifference about housing, lack of housing. Indifference about traffic. Then you can start asking questions around that problem that you've stated. So state each one of them as problems, and then rephrase it as a question. And then reframe it 3 to 5 times, okay? Each one, reframe 3 to 5 times. Okay? That's what you're to do. If you haven't done that yet, get to it. Problem, 1 question, 3 or 5 more questions, and see how it really shifts your questions. Are you done with that already, or is everyone done? How many? 2 more minutes? Okay, go. Okay, thank you. If you thought that was hard, raise your hand. Yeah. It's hard. It's not easy to come up with the right question. It takes practice. Framing a question well is like any other skill. It's like a muscle, and you need to practice it. Until you learn how to frame questions and frame questions and frame questions and reframe it, you're going to be stuck doing the same thing in the same way and solving a problem that doesn't exist, like getting kids to schools where they're not accepted, right? You have to ask the right questions in order to get the right solutions. And instead, what most people do everywhere is they jump to solution mode. I'm going to solve this. I got this idea and I want to solve it. It's going to be the best solution for the world's problems. This new vaccine is going to be great. Or it's this new thing, I've got this fabulous idea, but you don't know yet what questions you're really answering. So, what did you guys find hard about it? Because was it unclear, or?
We didn't really know what the manageable scale was.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. What is a manageable scale for solving a problem? How small, how specific does it need to be in order to really do something about it? I don't have an answer. What did you come up with? What was your big and small?
My grandparents are sick, was a small one, and they were the aging.
Aging. Oh, you got aging in both. So, how about that? So what were your 2 problems?
Yeah. You mean, how do we reframe that?
How did you reframe it as a problem? That my grandparents are sick as a bigger problem, so it's not just your grandparents we're caring about, because, you know, I like you and everything, but I don't care about your grandparents. So what's the first problem?
The standard of living, maybe. So how can we improve the standard of living?
Okay, so there's a poor standard of living for elderly people. So how might we improve the standard of living for the elderly? Okay, and what was about the aging one?
How are we concerned with birth control?
What was the problem? What do you mean? As people are aging, there's 2. What is it? What is the problem that you like to do?
Because we have more elderly than
young.
people.
Okay.
So the distribution graph tend to
Older people, the demographics.
So I think that family planning might do the job.
So
Because how might we, like when people concerned about the family
restate that one? Did you restate that a few different ways? Help them out. If your question is how might we encourage people to use family planning in order to have more change the demographics so there's more young people, what are some other ways of framing that question? If you're trying to motivate more births into younger people in Thailand, let's just go with that. We want more younger people, the population is aging, that's the problem. What are some questions you might ask around an aging population? So the demographics are shifting, there's more old people and less young people. What are some questions?
How could we support their cause?
How can we support older people better? What else might you ask?
How can you encourage young people to immigrate?
How do you encourage young people to come to Thailand? Right?
Yes.
Yes. What else might you ask?
How do you encourage old people to leave Thailand?
How do you encourage old people to go to Laos? Or India, or the United States? Exactly. Each one of these, so you can rephrase it, and every single time you reframe it, it's a different question with a different solution. You're seeing that? Okay, let's do another one. How about you guys here? What
We
were
have
you?
the education problem.
Okay, how'd you reframe that as a problem? That was
We break it into the smaller one, the inequality of education.
inequality of education is certainly a problem. What were some questions that you came up with?
How can we study everywhere?
How can you study
Everywhere.
everywhere? Okay, what else? So make it easier to study, right? What
How
else?
could we eliminate the language boundaries?
How can we, fabulous, how can we, what else?
How could we provide the equipment to the rural area?
Perfect. Excellent. What else? Do you have any others? These are good, right? Are you getting it? Do you see? These are all good questions. What else?
I mean, you both started good, you demand better.
Better. I never started such a perfectionist. What else?
How could we encourage more teachers to the remote area?
Beautiful. Now you're starting to come to questions that could be solvable. So, see? Is it starting to make sense? How about you guys? What do you have? Pick one of your topics. Over here. Yeah, you do. Either one of you.
There are some nice clothes I like, but I cannot afford them.
Nice clothes, I like them, but I can't afford them. So how did you make that a bigger problem?
The problem is I don't have enough money.
Okay,
So the question is, how might I make more money?
let's take it out of the I.
How might we?
So what's a problem? What is the fact that you don't have enough money to buy the things that you really want or need? What is that indicative of? What are some problems that you might, are there other people who share this problem, perhaps, in Thailand? So what problem is it?
The price of clothes are expensive.
Yeah, clothing is really expensive. Okay, that's something that people might say, I care about that, because I see it everywhere. So now what are some questions?
How to make manufacturers produce like cheaper clothes?
Okay, perfect. What else?
Maybe how might we encourage producers to use like local materials?
Excellent. Now you're solving more than one problem at once. What else?
Maybe how might we encourage the consumer to like the local product produced?
Great. Get it? Completely. As you keep asking, the more questions you ask, the better they are, too. Because that last question starts getting into something that actually is solvable. In the US, they had this whole big Made in the USA, and I know I've seen it in other countries too. You encourage, that's a marketing campaign. That's easy, right? So how do you get more things made in Thailand? How do you bring down the price of manufacturing in Thailand? And how do you encourage people to buy Thai-produced products? Do you have any others for that?
Not for now.
That's it. Well, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Do you guys have one?
For the small problem is about that.
I don't like my T-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
So hard.
I don't like my teacher.
I don't like.
But the focus for the different problem
It's we're confused. Like how to define the problem.
If you don't like, you help them out. How could you turn the fact that you don't like your teacher into, what is it a sign of, perhaps, that other people might share, besides that you personality clash? I mean, maybe everybody loves their teachers. Maybe the teachers are fabulous in Thailand.
Maybe teacher effectiveness is low, you're not feeling like you learn enough, it's a waste of your time.
Has anybody here not liked their teachers here in Thailand or their education? Oh, okay. All right. So we can be honest in here. So why not? So maybe the question could be, how do we improve education in Thailand? Make it better.
Or smaller issues such as how might we encourage teachers to be more creative and fun
Yes.
so we learn better.
Yeah. How
That's
right?
We face that all the time.
What else? How else can we do? What else could we do? Take that same problem. Don't like my teacher. How can I make teachers more fun? How can I improve education? What else?
how might we be more active in the classroom?
How might we find ways to be more active in the classroom?
Can we learn by ourselves?
How can we learn on our own? You know what? I'm all over that. I'm all for that. Take responsibility. How can we learn things on our own? How can we encourage online learning? How can we encourage teachers to get better training, to become better teachers? How could we, you can keep on going. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Who else wants to go? Over here, you guys.
Climate change.
Climate change. Okay, what'd you do to make it smaller?
How could you raise awareness of the importance of climate change?
Okay, how do you raise awareness? What are some questions? So the problem is lack of awareness. The question is, how do you raise awareness? And what other questions did you ask?
How could you improve education system to state climate change as well as well?
How can you improve education around climate change? What else?
How could you encourage people to ride bicycle?
How can you encourage, yeah? What else?
How could you reduce your own carbon footprint? How could we reduce all our carbon
How can we
footprints?
how do we get people to, what are the mechanisms, or what do you mean by that question?
Like in general, how to reduce carbon footprint,
Okay.
and we can break down this.
Okay, how do you get the information out about how you might reduce your carbon footprint? Do you have any others?
Not really, but
Okay, any others for carbon education about climate change? Any ideas? How do we make climate change an issue that people can see? How do we make climate change something that is local? So we care about it because we care about things that are local more than things that are invisible and in the sky. How do we point out the relationship between climate change and some of the disasters like flooding?
Freaking hot.
Or how hot it is in Bangkok, right? Like that. Okay, how about you guys? Do you have one?
We have a fair problem.
Okay,
There are some nice quotes I like, but I cannot quote it.
okay.
And first, how could we change the better style?
Yeah.
And how could we make it by ourselves?
Nice.
How could we make nice? How could we make nice clothes cheaper?
Right.
How could we make more machines
Yes, how do we make more money? Yeah.
How could we build community to share our clothes?
Nice. Now we've got a whole, it's a whole social enterprise right there. It's clothes sharing. I see it already.
How could we reduce tax?
Reduce what? Taxes. Reduce taxes so clothes are more affordable. Fabulous. That's fabulous. Who else? Do you guys want to go?
Yeah. Our spokesperson.
Which one you did? The big one?
Quickly.
Okay, indifference.
I thought you guys were ready for a long time.
We had indifference as
Okay.
our small problem.
Big problem.
Oh,
Yeah, it is.
okay, yeah, that's
It's a small word, but
Okay.
small sentence, but
So indifference. The problem is neighbors ignore each other in urban settings.
nice.
So, how do we get neighbors to talk to each other?
Mhm.
How do we get neighbors to simply greet each other?
Mhm.
How do you build a sense of community? Why don't more Thai people see the movie Timeline?
Is that your movie? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It's a movie you made?
No.
Oh,
It's a movie I saw in the movie theater. Okay, yeah. Yeah, there we go.
okay, excellent. That's a nice reframing because indifference is not feeling connected to people around you. So if you started to feel connected to your neighbors in an urban setting, you'd probably start to feel less indifferent about a whole lot of other things, right? So you went to what you saw as the core problem of indifference and tried to tackle that. So that's a big leverage point for solving a lot of other things. That's a great one. Who else? Who hasn't gone? Did you guys go? You did. Did you guys go? You did? Did you guys go? Okay. You want to go? Healthcare. Big problem. How do you make it tackleable? We can. Let's agree, right? We cannot solve healthcare. Right? If you say I want to solve healthcare, it won't be long before you throw your hands up in frustration and quit. So you have to make it something you can solve. So what is the problem you chose?
How might we make people understand benefits of being healthy?
Beautiful. So the problem is that people aren't healthy. So the question is, how do we get people to understand the benefits of being healthy? What else?
How might we encourage people to go exercise every day?
Okay, good.
How might we encourage people to eat healthier food?
To eat healthier food. What else?
How do we change the bad consuming habit of people?
How do we change the bad habits of people? What else?
How may we control the food quality?
How beautiful. That's fabulous. Each one of those has a different solution, and all of those would improve the healthcare and the healthiness of people anywhere, and they all are solved. They're all something you could actually tackle. They're hard. They're still hard problems. It's hard to motivate people to take care of themselves. But at least you can make a plan and work on it, right? So that's great. How about you guys?
We've got quality of life,
Okay?
and pretty small we found the safety, like of a person like walking down the street.
Okay?
And we have how do we increase the number of thieves?
A number of what?
Thieves, like
Decrease the number of thieves, yeah? They can't choose. Just, they're all probably good, so what's another?
Ooh, expectation.
how do we like increase the income of
like that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And how to make the teenage want to go back home on time, not too late.
So that there's sort of a curfew or a sense of not staying out late at night. Yeah?
Can we make police to do what they should do?
Right. I mean, that's a really great reframing of quality of life. It's a fabulous reframing. Quality of life is lowered because people don't feel safe on the street. And then you turn that into a whole bunch of questions, including how do we make the police do what they're supposed to do? How do we discourage thieves? How do we make a system so that people don't feel they need to be thieves? That's excellent. That's excellent. Who else? Who hasn't gone? Raise your hand if you haven't gone. Okay, you guys, pick one.
DA2, pick only one, right?
Yeah.
DA2 is about infant mortality.
About infant mortality, okay?
And this one is to make the question from bigger to make the question to the smaller one.
Yes.
It is how can we prevent, how can we innovate to effective ways to take care of infants closely?
Mm-hmm.
And that is one question.
Do you have any other questions?
And another one is about an apartment. There is no apartment for friends to stay over.
Okay.
And the question is how can we put more people, it could be stranger to stay together in a different space.
Okay. Good. Good. How about you guys? Healthcare.
About healthcare, how might we promote self-care more than healthcare?
What was the problem that you stated?
Oh,
Healthcare, the problem is
อธิบายว่าปัญหามันคืออะไรถึงมาตั้งปัญหาแบบนี้
พี่บอยนะ
because of Thai people don't take care of yourself. No. I mean the Thai people tend to go to the hospital when they have a sickness or have a disease.
Okay.
So why don't they take care of themselves before go to?
Okay. So the problem is that people go to the hospital. They won't take care of themselves, so they end up in the hospital. Is that the problem? Okay. So that's one of the questions: is why encourage people to take care of themselves so they don't need to go to the hospital. What else?
How might we encourage Thai people to reframe or the system of the healthcare?
Okay. What else? One more.
How might we encourage the restaurant to have a healthy menu for
Okay.
the customer?
Good. All right. Who else hasn't gone? Anybody else? Did you guys not go? The back. Okay. I think you want to go first? Yeah. You guys and then you guys. So I don't know your names. So the yellow shirt here.
Small or big?
Like, so what was the question?
I don't have in my apartment for a friend to stay over.
Your apartment is too small for a friend to stay over. So what's the bigger problem?
Aging.
No. How did you reframe that as a bigger problem?
Room size.
Apartments are too small.
Yeah.
Okay. So what might be a question that you would ask?
How can we increase the apartment?
Okay. How can we make apartments bigger? What else?
How can we remove something out of the apartment?
Oh, interesting. Okay. What else?
How can we make a room? How can we lock the waste so to get smaller people?
Oh, okay. That's right. So we don't take up so much space. Do you have another one?
How can we find a bigger room and how can we
make your,
find a new apartment.
how can you find a new apartment, a bigger apartment? Okay, great. Who else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
high impact mortality rate.
Yeah.
What was it?
Question? What other question?
So the problem is the high impact mortality rates.
Okay,
We have to refer to
make it smaller, yeah.
well,
How may we educate parents to take up good care of the baby?
Perfect.
How may we educate
how may we promote the parents to know the good procedure to take care of their baby?
Okay, yeah,
How might we know that those babies like to eat mashed banana?
okay. Okay,
How might we know that the suitable nutrition for the baby?
okay.
I like to call it baby.
Okay,
That's all.
good. Well, is there another group that has one? Yeah, go ahead.
It takes me nearly 2 hours to get to work.
2 hours to get to work. What's the bigger problem?
The bigger problem is we are not spending time effective in the day.
Okay, how can we be more effective? Time is not being effectively used in the day. Okay, so what are some questions?
How can we take shorter time to get to work?
Okay?
How can we find a job?
Yes.
And how can we work at home?
Yeah?
How can we do something while we are getting to work?
Nice. Great. So how, oh, one more group. Okay.
And he's a high schooler.
You're a high schooler. Great. What do you have?
About education.
Yep.
We focus about the how can we encourage children to increase self-study by themselves?
Okay.
How can we encourage a student to manage his time by himself?
Okay. Yeah?
How can we encourage student see how can he use his knowledge?
Nice. Nice. Well, it seems like you're doing all those things, right? Okay, so it's 8:30, so we're going to stop with that there. I'm going to quickly go through some quick other slides. So the other piece is that you can start to ask yourself. So now you've taken your questions and you've expanded them. Now you can start to pull them in and define them a little bit more. Who are you talking about? So if you're talking about getting to work in 2 hours, there's a different set of needs if you're the employee, but if you're the boss and your employees are taking 2 hours, you might have a different set of questions. How can I get people to live closer to their work so that they don't waste so much time? How can I create something? Google has solved that problem. In the US, they have buses that go around and pick up the employees that have Wi-Fi, so then you can work on the bus. You would think it's such a nice thing, but in fact it gets a couple more hours of work out of all the employees, right? So, you know, the government may have another problem about it, about the time it takes for public transportation or the crowded streets. So depending on who you are, you may frame the question a little bit differently. When? So if you're trying to come up with a solution that you're going to fix in a year, it's probably not going to be as big a question that if it's a solution that you're going to fix, that you say, well, you're going to fix in the next decade, right? So you have to scale the size of your question according to how long you think you have to fix it. And then where? Is it in the neighborhood? Is it in the city? Is it in the region? Is it in the continent or is it in the world? You know, how big of a problem is this? Is this a problem just for Bangkok? Is this a problem for the whole region or the world? How big you're approaching it will alter your question, right? And alter your solutions. So as you start to think about all of these things, you can start thinking about, you know, those kinds of things. So you add that scope. So how does the stakeholder, the time frame, and the location change your question? I'll go back to that. And so this is one that is, you know, we did this thing at Dartmouth called the pitch, where students had to get up and they had 2 minutes to pitch their innovative ideas. And so this would be an example of the pitch for the cricket thing. So you have the story. The world population is set to hit 8 billion by 2050 and will eat 50% more food. Demand for meat is expected to double in the next 40 years, but we're already using 70% of our agricultural land worldwide to produce it. The UN says Europeans have no choice but to join the 2 billion people who already make insects a mainstay of their daily diets. So the question is, so here's the problem and the story, why it's important. The question is, how might we persuade more Europeans to eat insects? The actionable next step that I've chosen for this is change the public perception of insects as a food. We talked about that. The measure of success, at least one species of edible insects are on the menu of a restaurant chain in Europe or available in a grocery store chain within 5 years. Right? So if you give yourself an actionable step that you can measure the success on, then you know you're moving in the right direction. And it's doable. You feel better about it. And then the ask, if I was asking at the pitch, I would say I need funding to develop a marketing campaign to convince top chefs in Europe to cook with insects. Right? So that's how I'm going to get to this, which will solve this, which will solve this question, which deals with the bigger problem. So it's kind of like, I've come up with this very actionable thing to solve this very big problem. So that's taking these big problems of not enough protein. You ask the question several ways. You come up with something that you think some direction to solve it, and you come up with a good way to pitch it and an actionable next step. So here's the process again. So you begin with a problem. You restate it as a question. You reframe it multiple times to help you understand the question and the problem better, right? You consider the size of the problem. Is it too small or is it too big to tackle? You consider the stakeholder, the time frame, and the location that you want to think about solving it in. You tell a good story. You tell us why it's important, and then you use measurable goals for achieving that success. So this is how you take a problem, you turn it into a question, you frame it really well, and then the problem is half solved. You just have to get to the next few steps. But you all came up with these amazing questions. You could just feel the energy shift as the question shifted, because the problem suddenly became solvable in new ways. I could just hear your brains going, oh yeah, we could do this, we could do that, we could solve it. It's really fun. It's like a game that you can play with yourselves for solving problems. Are there questions?
I don't have a question, but I got some fighting for myself. I find that some question move me more than others.
Yeah.
And I think this is more important. It's a very important.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you ask the question one way, you may not be moved, but you shift it a little and you care more. Yeah, that's a nice observation. What else? Questions or observations of things? Yeah.
Take a picture of this.
You what?
Take a picture of this. It's a very nice strategy.
I'm not sure I understood
He
you.
wants to take a picture.
Oh,
Yeah,
go
take a
ahead.
picture.
Yeah, of course. Did you? Go. I'll give you these slides. You can have the slides.
No, we're going to sell it.
Sell it. How much would you pay me? That's the question. How much would you pay me for the slides? How can I get more money? How can I sell my slides? What's the most money someone would pay for the slides? Okay, so here's the website. You can see our work. There's my email. Please contact me if you have any questions or thoughts about this. And thank you so much.